Hi, boys and girls. I wanted to show you a couple pictures from the last group of chapters, 85, 86, 87, and 88, before we finish up the book here. There was the airship that Roz was able to be transported on. And we are going to finish up. Chapter 89, The Departure. Dr. Malavo stepped aboard her airship and the door hummed close. A moment later, the engines fired up and the crowd of wild creatures backed away. Then the ship rose above the island, turned to the south, and disappeared into the sky. Chapter 90, The Island. Our story ends on an island where a robot was returning to her wild way of life. Roz had escaped from the world of humans, and now she was free to be her true self again. She could think and speak and do whatever she desired. And right now, what she desired was simply to watch the sunset. With Bright Bill on her shoulder, Roz hiked past trees and meadows and streams and climbed up, up, up the mountain to the very highest point of the island. Then our friends sat on the slanted rocks of the peak and watched the sun slowly sink behind the ocean. If you're like me, reader, you still have a lot of questions. How long will Roz live? Will she ever see another human or another robot? What joys and sorrows lie ahead for her? Roz still had some questions too, but now she also had some answers. Our robot knew where she came from. She knew the life she was supposed to live, and she knew the life she wanted to live. As Roz sat with Bright Bill, she slowly turned her head, scanning the island, taking it all in. The last rays of sunlight streaked across the treetops below. Animals scurried through the shadows. The air was fresh with the scent of flowers and of salt water. The sky began darkening. The crickets began chirping. The stars began twinkling. Everything was just right. Roz felt safe and happy and loved. The wild robot was home. And here's the epilogue. Autumn had returned to Hilltop Farm. The pasture was coated with frost, but the cows were out there, grazing on the last few tufts of fresh grass. Soon they'd stroll up to the parlor for another milking. Their routine never changed. Mr. Sharif was sitting in his pickup truck with his dog. The man stared out the window across the fields at the new robot. He was keeping a close eye on her. Tech Lab had promised him this one wouldn't run away, but he didn't trust her yet. These days, the children spent most of their free time working on the farm. Jaya had a way with the cows. Jad liked the tools and the machines. They were walking through the farm buildings together when they heard honking sounds in the sky, and a flock of geese glided down to the pond. For weeks, geese had been stopping by on their migrations, but there was something different about this flock. They flew in perfect formation, and they were led by a small, graceful goose. The flock calmly floated on the water. After a while, the leader shook his tail feathers, beat his wings, and fluttered over to Jaya and Jad. The goose stood in front of the children. He gazed deep into their eyes. Then he craned his neck around, plucked out one of his feathers, and laid it on the ground by their feet. Jaya and Jad looked around at each other and smiled. The children had been waiting for this moment. They'd always wanted to know how Roz's story would end, and now they finally knew. The wild robot was back where she belonged. And this right at the end says a note about the story, and so I just want to read this to you real quick. What would an intelligent robot do stranded in the wilderness? How might a robot adapt to the natural environment? Could a robot ever be truly wild? There are some of the questions that inspired me to create a character named Roz and to write my first novel for children, The Wild Robot. But I had many more questions. What would happen if Roz were taken away from the wilderness? How might the wild robot react to normal robots and to humans? Could she ever fit into the civilized world? The questions kept coming, and yet there was one question that I returned to again and again. Where does the wild robot truly belong? Does Roz belong on the island where she spent her first year of life, or does she belong in civilization, working for humans along other robots? I imagined her feeling torn between the natural world and the civilized world. I also imagined if given the choice, Roz would choose to live with her wild animal friends and family. But would she have a choice? Think about those things. Think about where you truly feel like you belong, and think about the themes of the story. Okay. So as the puzzle pieces are starting to fit together, and what do you think is going to happen to Roz as she is now back with her family? I hope you enjoyed that book, and I loved reading to you guys. Have a good day.